Hi, welcome to WFUZ-TV's The People's Voice podcast. I'm Blair Castro, and I'm here today with Thomas Jenkins. And we have Jeremiah Giles, candidate for Baldwin County judge, here in the studio with us today. Jeremiah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on.
So we wanted to ask a little bit about your campaign, I guess starting with, can you explain what position you are running for specifically for the circuit judge, if I'm not mistaken, and then a little bit about your background and your legal experience that leads you to be the best candidate for this role.
Yeah, absolutely. So the position that I'm running for is going to be Baldwin County Circuit Court, place 7. So 20 years ago when I was first out of law school, Baldwin County, I had 4 circuit judges. And with all the growth from, I think it's at 18 to 20 people a day moving in Baldwin County, the judges have increasing caseload as time goes on, but just, for more people, I guess. And so there's been some new judgeships created. So this will be the 7th one in total. This will be the 7th circuit judgeship, if that makes sense. But so nobody's had this position before. It's the first time, like literally the legislature just created. So in general, circuit court, it's going to be what they call a general jurisdiction, meaning it does most every type of case that you would have in circuit court other than like divorce or family law. They have specific courts for that. And the jurisdiction would geographically be Baldwin County. And then the subject matter would be civil cases that are $20,000 and above, and criminal cases, for the most part, felony criminal cases, so anything punishable by a year or more in the state penitentiary. There's some appeals from district court and stuff like that, but that's the meat and potatoes of what the job would be on that specific spot.
That's what I was curious about, because with the 7 places, I wasn't sure if they were like jurisdictionally related to like, okay, I handle like Robertsdale area or I handle this. So they handle just the whole county. Yeah,
so it's as I understand it, it's a randomization that the clerk's office does as far as which judge gets assigned which case. For instance, like no matter where we're at physically, if someone's arrested in, let's just say, Gulf Shores for a felony, when the clerk office, when it gets to circuit court, usually it's by way of indictment through grand jury, when that case is set up on the indictment, it would randomly be assigned to one of the general jurisdiction circuit court judges.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So wanted to ask about your background. I know you went to a top 100 law school, which I'm very jealous of because I did not go to a top. I was like a bottom 100. I don't know if there even is a saying. I went to a bad one. But you went to a very prestigious school, and wanted to ask about your academics and what you think, helps you in this role.
Sure. So I actually started out at a different law school, which is kind of rare, right? Not too many people transfer. I started out at Florida Coastal School of Law, which was a newer school that, is, I don't know, tier whatever, 4,000, I don't know. But
that's funny. I actually got into Florida Coastal and I had to decide between that and another one because they gave me like 100% scholarship. And I was like, not very good. I ended up not going there, but yeah, I know what you mean.
so I was there for a year, starting out, and made great grades with the goal of I wanted to transfer to a law school that I don't come from a family of attorneys. And so I didn't really have any knowledge of the legal profession much before I decided to go to law school, and when I could just look up myself. So I wanted to go to the best school I could go to, obviously. So St. Louis took me as a transfer student after the first year. And so then I graduated from St. Louis University in 2006. And immediately came home and started working at the DA's office here in Baldwin County, which I know you know, but I'll add for anybody out there that I'm a native to Baldwin County. I was born and raised in Baldwin County, lifelong resident. And so after trying cases for 5 years, I went out on my own, opened my own practice in Summerdale, general practice law firm. Whatever comes in the door, if I can handle it, great. And if I can't, for some reason, I'll find somebody else that can for the most part. So I've handled a little bit of almost everything that will come before a circuit court judge.
What inspired you to get into law originally?
So that's a great question. probably the first thing that really grabbed my attention, probably is most responsible for getting me going to law school, was that my uncle, Gary Underwood's grandmother, Miss Wilma Underwood, was murdered in Foley in 1987. And it was a horrific crime. She was beaten to death by two gypsies that were like wandering gypsies, I call it, but they didn't live here. Mm-hmm. And so they beat her to death, stomped on her everywhere, but on her larynx especially. Mm-hmm. I believe she made it to a phone to when they left, and she was still alive, and she called a family member, and they couldn't even understand. It was just garbled because they, I guess, destroyed her voice box. So,
oh my gosh,
they, she passed away, and I was young, so I didn't go to court and watch the trial myself. I was involved later on in some areas, but post trial. But seeing the aftermath of what that did to a family firsthand like that,
sure,
and just hearing all the stories about our DA at the time, Dave Whetstone, he was DA in Baldwin County for over 20 years. He tried that case, I believe, 3 times to death penalty verdicts. And the way that he fought for justice for the family, that really just made an impression on me. Mm-hmm. To see that somebody actually could, in one of the worst circumstances that anybody could find himself in, that somebody really took care of them as best they could.
Yeah.
It's an interesting case that I could talk about all day, but they had to track them down. It was 2 guys that were related. One of them committed suicide in prison, I guess pre-trial. And so then the other one fled to Canada. Bogey Hall, who was a longtime investigator for Dave Whetstone here, he tracked them down. It was an awesome job by him as well. And they ended up, the guy fled to Canada, and I am hazy on my memory on some of this, but essentially they had to come up with like a ruse to get him back across the border so they could arrest him and extradite him. But that really inspired me to see the difference that somebody can make with knowing that somebody needs to be held accountable and then going through the hard work of doing that and making sure that it happens. So that's in a nutshell what got me into this field, inspired me.
That's I have a story not as personal, I guess, but I was a witness to a homicide when I was 18 years old. And it's funny, it takes like something to kind of spark your interest in trial or court or the law. Sure. And I ended up speaking as a witness at the trial and ended up getting a mistrial. It was a high profile homicide of a boy I went to school with, and my best friend at the time, another boy, was attempted murder. So one got murdered and one was attempted murder, and they were both stabbed. We were 18, and this guy that stabbed him was like 23 at the time, an older guy who's in the Marines, who pulled out an illegal butterfly knife, a very large blade, and stabbed the 2 boys in the front yard of his girlfriend's house after a party that we were all talking about and invited to. So there was quite a few witnesses, and this ended up being a big, high-profile case. It was taken by Levin Papantonio, attorney at the time. It was very big deal for this community, and the guy got life in prison, and then his attorney, I was a witness in that, so I experienced some weird things, like depositions weren't matching up. I saw the whole mistrial happen, had to go through and traumatize the family by having the whole trial happen over again because of technical errors. And I was like, okay, procedurally this is weird. I feel like I could do this better. And so I was very young. I was just like, there's things that aren't happening here that need to be. And it got my interest in that. And that's kind of what sparked my interest to go to law school too. So people don't realize, and I ended up wanting to be a prosecutor very badly and ended up doing the total opposite, doing criminal defense, which is funny how that happens. Yeah. So in terms of your practice, what is your practice background?
Like I said, it's pretty much whatever comes in the door right now, as far as just being a small town firm. But so when I was at the DA's office, I was there for 5 years, and our DA's office was a lot smaller in those days than it is now, which sounds funny, but 20 years is 20 years. So we had a lot more now they can specialize a little bit more at that office. Like you have a dedicated assignment, like you're in this court or you have these types of cases. Whereas we were kind of all hands on deck to some extent, and we just didn't have the resources that thankfully we have now. And so literally I handled everything from speeding tickets to working on capital murders in that role. And I was there throughout my boss's term, which Dave Whetstone had kind of prompted my old hero that endorsed me was had a position for me available when I was finishing up law school, but he retired right as I was getting ready to actually graduate. And so his assistant took his spot, Judy Newcomb, who became a great mentor to me. And I was there throughout her term. I left off from that office when she left her office, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
What kind of, I'm trying to think of how to word it, what kind of strange dealings have you had in practicing law with clients or with people that you've had to maybe prosecute or anything like that you can think of that you can share?
I mean, there's been so many. Of course, I want to respect any client's privacy, obviously, but so I'm trying to think. I had some. What's interesting that I could talk about?
Any stalkers or people trying to cut your brake line? Or
I had an unfortunate one where it was a domestic violence case that I was prosecuting, and the victim was in a relationship on and off again with her boyfriend, and there had been problems leading up to it, and it got more serious as time went on. So when I came into it, he was charged with a domestic violence second strangulation, which is a felony, Class B felony. You could see it from, especially the outside looking in, as far as their personal dynamic, that things were just deteriorating to the point where it was getting worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And so there were meetings with, myself and their family and everything. And what he was accused of doing was breaking into her residence because they were on again, off again, and doing some very horrific things, and including kidnapping by taking her out, including rape, and strangulation. So we had a lot of serious charges. And I felt that part of my role was to impress upon her how precarious those situations can get. Yeah. And so I did my best. I met with her. I told her flat out that there's not much more, in my opinion, serious that can happen other than somebody gets killed. Mm-hmm. And that's the last thing anybody wants to see.
Right.
But if you don't have, at some point, some, boundaries because you can have bond conditions and stuff in place all day long, but if the person that's the victim doesn't let the person continue to come around, it's hard for any system to protect you from yourself almost.
Yeah. I ran into that a lot on the street. I was a patrolman and would get the same couples, it was a very small town, so I get the same 3-4 couples, every few days, really, it seemed like.
When that case was still pending when I left the DA's office, when my boss was terminated. And not long after that, somebody sent me the news headline, and it was unfortunately a murder-suicide. So the guy that was the defendant in my case killed her, the victim, and himself. So, and that kind of hits you a lot of different ways because it's like you can almost see it coming, and you try so hard to prevent something like that from happening.
Yeah.
So sometimes it happens anyways, but I've learned a lot from situations like that, about processes and about the way that the court system should work. And it's kind of prepared me, I think, for this next role, handling a lot of serious cases like that. Mm-hmm.
I had a question about decorum in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And as a judge, how do you feel like your decorum? I mean, you're already an attorney, but we've had experiences where we go into a courtroom and the judge is just completely like very disrespectful and flippant and insulting to some of the plaintiffs and defendants. She, gender neutral person, will just go out there and be very cruel to the people in the courtroom and treat them lower than. And I hated experiencing that on that side. And then I've seen it happen on the other side too, where I'm working in the courtroom. So, how do you think your courtroom decorum would be?
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate to practice in front of a lot of good judges, and I've learned something from each of them. And to me, I think it's important that everybody's treated with respect. And I think no matter if somebody's accused of a crime, if somebody's a victim of a crime, if it's a civil dispute over money or whatever, I just feel like every person is entitled to that basic human decency and respect.
So you're not a Judge Judy that like cuts people off mid-sentence or anything?
I would like to think that I won't be.
Or insist that you're lying.
I would like to. I really enjoy practicing in front of judges that stay even keel.
Sure.
That can be respectful no matter what situation you're in. And to the best of my ability, that's the kind of judge that I would be.
Yeah, because somebody that, we went through that together on the other end of just a bad judge. It can be a horrific experience, especially when you're legitimately trying to get something done, when you've been the victim of something and they won't even listen to you or treat you like a human being.
Absolutely.
And we don't have room for any of that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've had a lot of support amongst different judges and some that have taken me under their wings at different points in my career and now, that I've been able to respect and learn from. And that's something I'm always looking to learn and emulate when I see a judge that knows how to command their courtroom the right way. I want to take notes from, because to me, nobody wants to be there typically.
Right.
In your court. Like,
right,
it's not like anybody's like, I wanted to wake up this day and be a victim of a crime, or I wanted to have somebody steal money from me, or whatever. And so, and so whenever you also have to deal with, everybody's human. Anybody can wake up on the wrong side of bed or whatever. But to the best of your ability, I think, to strive towards remembering that everybody's a human being that comes in there and that we're all dealing with different things, I think goes a long way.
Sure.
When you know that the person's sitting up on the bench is trying. And they're not, you hear horror stories and stuff of judges, lack of their term, pitching a fit or temper tantrum up there or something like that. I would hope that I would never be accused of anything like that.
On the flip side, though, for everyone who does have to go to court, show the judges the respect that you want to receive as well. And the attorneys, you go to court and you see people dressed incredibly inappropriately or acting some sort of way where it's just like, okay, that is a place of respect for everyone. And if you want to be treated that way, like as a judge, you also sort of have to walk that line, because you have to tell people this is my courtroom. You can't come here and disrespect everybody either.
That's right.
So, you get what you give. You got to walk in as a person, as a lay person, act accordingly. Yeah.
And as an attorney, you only have so much control over people that you represent, no matter what you're handling. And so you can tell them that what you just said a million times, and then you show up for that court sometimes, and they're not dressed the way that you wanted them to dress. And different judges have different ways they handle that. But I think that I don't know, just in life in general, much less being a judge, I think it's important that we try to have as much respect for each other as we can.
One thing you mentioned that stood out to me was the importance of mentorship. So I think it's great that you say you have people who have mentored you in this role and, throughout your career, especially in the legal field. I feel the same way. Like when I was in law school, I had a judge, Judge Joe DeRocher. Everybody should go Google him. He's a wonderful, really great man. He was from Pensacola, but I met him in Orlando, and I was from Pensacola. He helped me write my law school thesis, and he sadly passed away right before it published. Very suddenly, and I was really devastated about that. But he was a great mentor to me, and I think it's interesting how when you're a young attorney, you should find a judge. Honestly, find a judge, because they're the most neutral sort of people who have done it all and who can see things from different perspectives that a regular practicing attorney probably can't. Yeah, so I think it says a lot that you have judge mentors who have helped you in your role here.
As a young lawyer, it was really important to me to ask as many questions as I could from any judge that would take the time to answer. And so, just asking them, well, from your perspective, what do you want to see if somebody comes into court with this kind of case, or what's worked or hasn't worked? And, I don't know. I just like to think I've been like a sponge in some regard to that, because I just think that people are hopefully always wanting to learn. And so I enjoy that anyways. I'm a bookworm. But yeah, I've had several that have taken me under the wing over the years that have taught me. At law school, they say that.
Yeah, but we can keep going.
Yeah, we got that one.
Actually.
And, in law school, I think I've heard this said, I'm sure you did, that they don't teach you how to be a lawyer, they teach you how to think. And I think that's true to a large extent. I mean, you get out of law school and then you learn what you're actually kind of doing. And so I think there's definitely a benefit to being in a job where you're in court a lot. And so luckily when I started out at the DA's office, being in trial all the time and being in front of different judges, and you get a view of how different judges do it too, so that you have a varied perspective, I guess. And so I think that was beneficial early on, especially.
Was there ever a point where you were like, man, I don't want to practice law. This isn't the career for me? Or is that just me?
I mean, I think there are those days, right? I think that everybody probably has some days like that, but I never really seriously thought about switching careers. And I tell this story, when I was in law school, I was recruited by the CIA for a year. And that was the one area outside of a typical lawyer role that I was interested in. Then when that didn't work out, the FBI recruited me and offered me a job. And there was a hiring freeze then in the recession. Mm-hmm. And so in the meantime, I passed the bar and started the DA's office and trying cases, and 2 years go by. And then they finally left the hiring freeze, and they're ready for me to start and go to Quantico. And at that point, I got cold feet doing that because I felt like I love Baldwin County so much, and FBI seems awesome, but they couldn't tell me where I was going to be stationed. Mm-hmm. And so, at that stage of my life, I was building a house, late 20s, early 30s. And I liked practicing law enough that I said, thanks guys, but I'm not going to do it. And I think it was the best decision for me. Everybody's different, but things happen for a reason. I believe that. I don't think it's just a cliche. And I just felt I didn't have peace about switching into that. So for the most part, I've enjoyed being an attorney. I came in from a different mindset, I think, than a lot of practicing attorneys, in not having my dad as a lawyer or judge or my grandpa or anything like that. I kind of came into it with eyes wide open and not knowing what was good or bad or what, just trying to learn. And I think you play catch up a little bit maybe when you're a first generation lawyer. Mm-hmm. It's been my experience anyhow. And but I think for good and bad. So it's kind of what you make of it, I guess. Anything else in mind?
So that begs the question, could you tell us a little bit about your family, is very political, and that may offer some criticism for some people?
Yeah, so I come from a large family that's been in Baldwin County for a very long time. My dad's side of the family, I believe I'm fourth generation Baldwin County. My mom's dates back to, I've got an ancestor that was Red Eagle was his Indian name. William Weatherford was his European type name. I don't know what the right term for that would be. And so that goes, we go back to some extent before European settlements in Baldwin County and surrounding areas. There weren't exactly lines drawn on a map, but some people in my family have been more involved to different extents. But when I was about 12 years old, my family had not been politically active. And in our small town, Summerdale, there were a lot of challenges that people were running into. I played a lot of sports. My siblings played sports, my cousins, and then just my friends. My dad coached a lot of our teams, which was awesome. But there was such a lack of facilities, equipment. It was, it's smaller than some of the other towns, so not as much budget. And so, but that we had felt like the people who had been in charge, and I'm not criticizing them, but it felt like there could be more of an emphasis on youth sports and that type of thing, and just focusing on growth, because it was going to happen regardless. And so, in our opinion, in my opinion, you can sit there and just be so anti-growth that you hurt your town, or then it comes in ways that you don't want it to come. And so, and we had seen a lot of that kind of, we don't want a single thing to change in this town. Like, this is what's been done. This is what's going to be done.
It's like countywide, yeah.
Yeah, and so and I guess it can happen anywhere, right? But we thought some of those attitudes and stuff just could be approached in a different way. And so my uncle ran for mayor, David Wilson, Summerdale in 1992. My dad, Buddy Giles, ran at the same time for the Summerdale Town Council. And I remember that summer, I had a little stencil, and I would, go make these signs like vote for, Wilson and Giles, and I had a little elephant stencil to indicate that we were Republicans, and I would go sit them on the side of the road by stop signs and stuff, and so that impacted me. I really felt like they were doing it for the right reason. My dad and my uncle, that they saw a need for leadership, and they just went out and tried to do it. And as Baldwin County grew, they faced a lot of challenges, but my dad ended up being on the council, I believe, for 3 terms. My mom came onto the council right at the end of his, and she's still, Norma Giles, she's still on the Summerdale Town Council. And my uncle was mayor for 33 years. In 2018, my aunt, Village of Underwood, ran for county commission the first time, and I helped run her campaign, and we were successful, and she's a current commissioner. But I think it's important throughout this process to let people know that, I'm my own person. I respect things that my family's doing. I love my family, but I'm going to disagree with them as much or more than I am anybody else. You'll fight with your siblings as much as anybody you ever meet, probably, at least the way that I've seen it. And so there's always people that want to say this is part of some grand conspiracy, or I don't know, some group, but really we didn't come from any sort of kind of money or anything like that. It's just a family that kind of had to bond together because they had to. When I was born, my uncle and I shared a bunk bed, Uncle David, and Billy Joe had the 3rd bedroom, and my parents had the master. And so we had a 3-bed, 1-bath house, and that wasn't atypical of people here. It wasn't like we were that different or anything, but we just had to work together to make it. And so I've been really proud of how each person in our family has been able to work hard and progress and find their own kind of niche in their own field. But I think more than anything, it's just that admiring the way that they went after public service. I always wanted to do that if I found the right position for me. Does that make sense?
I think it's good to be inspired by your family. I don't like that people necessarily paint that as a negative thing. Of course, who wouldn't be inspired by their relatives or family serving the public and wanting, to help the community? I think that's a great thing. But I can see how people have criticized that in a way, but I feel it's unfair because I see it. It's not grooming you for politics. It's they wanted to serve and now you want to serve in a whole different capacity. It's not even like the same position at all.
No conflicts
Yeah.
of anything really that could come up. I agree with you. Obviously, I would think I'm a pretty regular guy, so I grew up right here, hunting, fishing, swimming in all the waters, and it shaped who I am. And I didn't have any particular idea that I was going to run for office someday. When I had other opportunities over the years, I could have ran when I was younger for different spots. I didn't feel peace and prayed about those spots, and it just wasn't the right decision for me. So when the legislature created this position, a lot of prayer and thought went into it, and me and my family and my wife. And it was what I felt God wanted me to do at this point. And as I heard other names that were being bandied about for people that might be interested in the position and things like that, I felt like people that I was hearing names for maybe weren't the most qualified that you'd like to see in a circuit court spot. And so different people were like, well, you can't be a critic though if you're not willing to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And that made sense to me. So in my race, I strongly obviously feel that I'm the most qualified candidate. And I wouldn't be running if I didn't feel that way. I think people will say things like that, but I really mean it. It was not an easy decision for me to run for office. I like my firm. I like practicing law. I believe this is what God had for me. And so if the people of Baldwin County decide to hire me for this job, I'll do it to the best of my ability and with integrity and respect. And if they don't, that's fine. I'll keep practicing law.
So something you mentioned before was that part of your judicial philosophy, if you will, was that you don't believe judges should legislate from the bench. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say my view on that is one of judicial restraint, meaning I respect very much that we had founding fathers that set up co-equal branches of government, checks and balances, and each has their role. And to me, the legislature makes laws. That's their role. They have that as that's the job description you sign up for in that role. To me, judges should not be activists or try to legislate from the bench. That's not that job. If somebody wants to do that from the bench, they need to instead run for the legislature. And to me, judges need to narrowly interpret any statute that comes before them, and they need to apply the law as it's written to the facts that come before them. And you might not always like what the law says, but I believe it's important that, of course, you have to search throughout your own conscience and do things, but I think it's also important to respect the rule of law. And so very much I have the mindset of, I guess, a conservative, Republican, in that I respect the different branches of government.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your involvement in the community, because I definitely see you at a ton of different functions doing a lot of different things. And I know from experience that's not easy. It requires a lot of effort and time to be doing all this, but I've seen you doing that even before you were running. Like, you seem pretty involved. So can you talk a little bit about your different involvement with various things in Baldwin County?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned, I guess, youth sports, growing up playing those. I also coached at various times, especially baseball. And I kind of have a varied background, I guess, in that regard. I was a youth pastor 2 different times here in Baldwin County. It was, an interim basis. I did it to help out until the right guy could come for the job. I didn't feel called to that type of ministry, but trying to, help out. And in 2014, then Sheriff Paul Smack asked me to be on the foundation of the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office Foundation, which handles the charitable things that they do as far as money that comes into the office, and the board makes decisions on how to disperse those funds. Is, I guess, the primary role. And I agreed to that. I sat on that board for 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, and learned a lot and appreciated it. My time on that ended about the time of the pandemic, right before, I guess, right at it. And and I mentioned being involved in other political campaigns. But for the most part, I think it just comes from trying to have a servant leader's mindset, in that if you can get into something where you can help people and you have the time and ability, well, why not? Live once, make the most of it. So that's been my view.
That reminds me of, I don't know if you've read Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. That was what it's a good book. That's kind of the philosophy he has in that book too. Yeah. But you just doing things as a leader means listening a lot sometimes and just showing up. And as we've seen throughout our experience in Baldwin County and getting involved in campaigns and looking at how the government systems work, a lot of listening does so much. That's really all you need to do sometimes. You're not ever going to agree with everyone or make everyone happy, but the commissioners or the people that take the time to actually listen to constituents, sit down with them, hear out their problem, they might not be able to solve it, but at least they didn't ignore us and they gave us the time of day. That says a lot about their character, I think, and half the time that's the battle itself. So
I agree.
If you want to learn more about Jeremiah Giles, you can visit his website, Jeremiah4Judge with the number 4.com, or you can find him on Facebook at Giles for Judge, and that's Giles is Giles. You can also just Google Jeremiah Giles. The election is May 19th, 2026, and check out Jeremiah Giles for Baldwin County Circuit Clerk Judge, Place 7.